effective measure.
Does anybody need any more time? Set to go?
Yes, that's
So I will call this session of the Board of Revision to order. Begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. With me on the panel today, at the far end, is Richard Whitbread. Beside me is Carrie Linklater. Our secretary today is Huda Aziz, and the assessor is Lindsay Wera. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we'll limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony, followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. If you've not already done so, could you please put your phones on silent? Use of phones is permitted during the hearing with the approval of the chair.
Please state your full name. And you swear the evidence you are presenting is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Sir, please state your full name.
Marcel.
And you swear the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
First item on our docket today is 329 Aubrey Street, amount of assessed value. Ms. Ware.
Thank you. We're looking at file number 19-3711, roll number 12-081-585-000. The address is 329 Aubrey Street. I'm recommending to maintain the 2020 assessed value of $125,000. This is a surface parking lot located on the east side of Aubrey Street near Portage Avenue, and behind, sort of behind 970 Portage Avenue, and it's also owned by that particular building. I had this appeal in 2018, and I made a recommendation to reduce the value to $48,000. If you look at page 3, you'll see aerial photos of the subject property. On page 4, you'll see subject property photos. On page 6, you'll see land sale comparables for the subject property. We have $55.51 a square foot. On page 7, you'll see an income valuation workup for the subject property. On page 9, you'll see cap rate information. On page 10, you'll see Municipal Assessment Act information. On page 11, you'll see the subject property income and expense mailer. And on pages 14 through 17 and 18, you'll see our agenda. On page 17, you'll see more cap rate information. That's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
And by the way, if either party is inclined to tell us what happened in the past, previous boards, that sort of thing, we're disinclined to pay any attention to that. We'd far rather go on the arguments that are presented today. So keep that in mind. Mr. Navarro.
Yes, do you think that this parking lot, well, you've stated that this parking lot actually services the office building in front of it, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And do you think that the capitalization rate that you have in place reflects that?
It's our model cap rate.
It's your model cap, okay. Do you think that this is a good location in terms of future development, anything like that?
This is typically ancillary parking.
Okay, okay. Those are my questions.
Mr. Whitbread.
So, all of this is modeled information,
Yes.
and did you change anything in the model?
No.
No, it's straight on the model. Yep, that's it, thank you.
Ms. Linklater?
So any floods?
Let me just check. Yes, there are.
Did you inspect?
I have not inspected this property, no.
That's where it happened.
I typically inspect properties when there's a discussion about stall count, but there's never been an argument between the stall count here, so I haven't made it out there.
That's all my questions, thank you.
Sorry, you might have mentioned this. Electricity is provided, is it?
Pardon me?
Electricity is provided and...
There are plugs there,
There's
yes.
plugs. Okay. Based on the photos, the condition is reasonable.
From what I can tell, yes.
That's all my questions. Thank you very much.
Sorry, just
Yeah.
redirect. Sorry, you had brought up the 2018 assessment?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and, sorry, could you say it was, you had a recommendation at 48?
Yes.
Okay. Why the increase?
This is just the model value.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Navarro.
Okay. And this is Tick Unlimited, room number 12081, 585 000, 329 Aubrey Street. You can see on the first page, this site area is exactly 2,252 square feet. There are not 27 stalls there, there are 7 stalls there. 2020 assessment is $125,000. We are requesting a value of $53,000. Zone C2, again, it services the building up in front of it. If you turn to page 5, we have some sales of properties here. If you turn to page 6, we have gross monthly rates for areas outside of the downtown. I would say when you look at these rates, please keep in mind that these rates are outside of the downtown, but still relatively close to the downtown, whereas this one is out of the downtown. So we placed a slightly lower gross rate on it. The expense ratio is 45% that we're recommending. And if you turn to page 7, we have 7 stalls at $78 gross, giving us an annual income of $6,552. We've applied a 45% expense ratio on it. That is $2,948, giving us a net operating income of $3,604. Capitalized at 6.75%. That gives us an income value of $53,387. And the value that we are requesting is $53,000. And I believe we also included the income and expense statements for the property. the adjacent property, this property. I'm open for questions.
I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Whitbread?
I have no questions.
Ms. Leclerc?
No questions.
Okay, leave it to me. Come on, let me have some. About my pouring through this, your comparable rents, are they for properties of this size? No, they're considered to be larger, right? What impact does that have?
In terms of
Uh,
rates,
Yeah.
I don't think it would have any impact on rates. It would have an impact on the net operating income. Once you factor in expenses, every parking lot performs slightly different, but rates in the downtown, for example, are fairly stable, fairly common. We have a median in the downtown of $185. That is in the CBD. In the Exchange District, we have a slightly higher rate at 195 because we feel that the East Exchange District, in particular, performs a little bit better than the CBD. Outside of the downtown varies, but if you look at these locations, they are not that far out of the downtown. In contrast, Aubrey is out of the downtown. So we made a slight adjustment downward. In this type of area, there would not be much demand for parking simply because there is on-street parking. People can just park for free. They don't have to pay for parking. So really, this is about servicing the building, and that's why the capitalization rate is higher than what we would typically use for a parking lot. It's a parking lot because it's servicing the building, the office building in front of it.
Is that parking necessary then for people in the building, or is it?
Well, they must have
just
thought
an
it was,
option?
they must have thought it was necessary, or otherwise they wouldn't have purchased the property to actually build the parking on it. So obviously, there's a need for them to have parking for their staff or customers or clients that come in. I actually went to this parking lot. There are several stalls there, and they are plugged. And it seems like the parking is assigned, so it would seem that there's demand for them at least.
The building that the services, is that a multi-tenant building, or is it owner occupied?
I'm not sure. I didn't actually walk into the office.
Okay, I'm just wondering whether there's any agreements that parking shall be provided that go with the leases.
We're not aware of that.
Okay. That's all my questions. Thank you very much. We will then move to 633 McDermott Avenue. Ms. Ware.
Thank you. The file number is 19-3849. The roll number is 13-061-509-000. This is a service parking lot located near the southeast corner of Sherbrooke Street, McDermott Avenue. I'm recommending to maintain the 2020 assessed value of $218,000. The 2018 value is $235,000, which was withdrawn at the Board of Revision. This has 14 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3, you'll see aerial photos of the subject property. On page 4, you'll see subject property photos. On page 5, you'll see land sales. The subject property is 5,408 square feet, and we have a square footage rate of $40.31 a square foot. My land sale comparables range from $20.08 upwards of $46.10, and you can see them in the chart on the top of page 6. And they go from older to more recent sales. Again, these are not time-adjusted sales, although you can see that time adjustments would show that the older sales would typically increase. On page 7, you'll see our modeled income approach. We have 14 stalls with $65 a stall for an annual net rent of $10,920. Our parking rents are net, so they're net of all expenses. We have a 5% cap rate on this property, which is the same as the 2018 cycle. This is considered in our outer downtown parking model. So our value is $218,000. At the bottom of page 7, you'll see a number of comparables. All of these are comparables near hospitals because the subject property is right across the street from the Health Sciences Center. So we typically get hospital comparables to defend parking near hospitals. So number 1, Pembina Highway is the Victoria Hospital, and they have $90.10 a stall. Comparables number 2 through 9 are at the St. Boniface Hospital, and they range from $232.60 a stall downwards of $52.14 a stall. You'll note that the comparables at the St. Boniface Hospital, comparables number 5, 8, and 9, those are typically further away comparables that don't offer any casual parking. Comparables number 10 through 13 are near the Health Sciences Center. 883 Sherbrooke, 655 Elgin, and 894 Sherbrooke Street are further away from the Health Sciences Center than the subject property, as well as 708 Notre Dame is on Notre Dame, on the other side of the parking structures on past Maryland. On page 8, you'll see our income valuation summary. On page 9, you'll see cap rate evidence. You'll note that there are no parking lot cap rates on this chart. This is our general cap rate information that we provide. On page 11, you'll see the income and expense mailer for the subject property. If you turn to page 19, you'll see cap rate information. Again, this is general cap rate information of actual sales that have transpired, that have been reviewed and had a stabilized net operating income reviewed. The typical idea with parking lots is there are a range of cap rates and there are different reasons that parking lots sell. Typically, parking lots are vacant land, and vacant land does not sell with a cap rate. When we have a number of improved properties that have cap rates that range, showing on page 19, between the 5 and about 8%, when parking lots are essentially vacant land that have much less risk, much less capital cost involved, it doesn't make sense for it to have a cap rate that's significantly higher than an improved property. So we've just applied our modeled income approach, similar that we have every cycle. Our modeled income approach is the exact same as last cycle, although our net rents for the outer downtown area actually decreased based on the evidence we saw. So the monthly net unit rent compared to last cycle is a lower rate, but the cap rate is the same, which is why the rate has decreased since 2018. That's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Navarro?
Yes. Looking at your comparables on page 7, would you say that 883 Sherbrooke, 655 Elgin Avenue, and 894 Sherbrooke Street are the closest comparables?
Yes, I said 10 through 13 are the closest comparables. They are the only ones that are near the Health Sciences Center.
And on page 6, no, this is not really relating to page 6. You mentioned that in your model, this is in the downtown. This is why you assigned the capitalization rate. Can you just respond to, or maybe reiterate what that comment was regarding the cap rate and why this area is considered the downtown?
It's our outer downtown parking model, so it's not actually our inner downtown. We have 3. We have inner downtown,
Okay.
and outer downtown. And outer downtown, we call it outer downtown, but it's essentially for the outskirts of the downtown and the hospitals. That's the reason, and that's the tier for that model, is the outskirts. It's not really the downtown, the higher producing parking, but it also encompasses the hospitals, because in the suburbs, typically, Parking is required by bylaws, and so parking for income-producing purposes doesn't really exist in the suburbs. It's more on a recovery basis for ancillary parking, although at hospitals, that is income-producing parking. They're charging for parking. It's big money for people to be paying for parking at hospitals. So our outer downtown parking model is there for the outer downtown. That's not really the Exchange and the Central Business District, but also to recognize that the hospitals are not suburban parking, because they really are the multiple places in the city that charge for parking that is outside of the downtown where parking is not required.
Okay. And would you say that this is open to the market in terms of parking?
It is not.
So it couldn't rely on any type of excess income coming in from other types, like casual parking, correct?
No, and we view that as a business decision, because if you're looking at what a willing buyer and seller would want on the market, if someone was to purchase that property, they would want to take advantage of casual parking because of the amount of casual parking and people coming to the hospital and needing places to park.
Now, in terms of the area, this is outside of the downtown zoning policy area, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you've also mentioned that you call this downtown because it includes the hospital areas, those types of areas, correct?
We call it the outer downtown. We don't call it the downtown. We call it the outer downtown because it is outside of the downtown.
Just looking at one of your sales here, your comp 7 on page 6, that is the highest one that you have at $46.10, and that happened November 17. Now, it's also 2,126 square feet. Do you think that the size of the parcel has an effect on the price?
There could be a number of economies of scale that are involved, but it's almost half the size, but it is a slightly higher price. It's also a significantly inferior location. 250 in Logan isn't really near anything, whereas the subject property is right by the hospital. If I was someone who was purchasing property or wanted to invest in a property, and I was looking for property around a hospital, I would probably want to get the closest proximity spot that I could, and this is directly across the street.
Now, you also mentioned that the capitalization rate that you're using here is 5%, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It's the same as 2018.
And the capitalization rate in the downtown area, we're talking about the downtown area last cycle, 2018, was also 5%, correct?
Yes, we had 5% for the downtown and 5% for the outer downtown. This cycle, we have a different cap rate for the inner downtown that we do for the outer downtown.
Those are my questions.
Mr. Whitbread,
I have nothing.
Ms. Linklater.
Yes, did you inspect the property?
I have inspected this property. I inspected it on October 25th, 2013.
And it has flex,
I can confirm that. Yes, it does.
and it's assigned as you had stated.
It's assigned, it's for the Manitoba Clinic. I had inspected it at the time because they actually owned the property across the street, the larger one, and there was a discrepancy with the stall count, so I had inspected them both at the same time. Subsequently, the Manitoba Clinic sold that property across the street to Cancer Care, although they retained this one.
Thank you, that's all my questions.
Just curious about hospital area parking. Having paid through the nose for it. There are certainly large parkades, entirely different breed of cat,
Yep.
different cap rates, that sort of thing. To what extent are there surface lots around HSC that are used as assigned parking for people working at either HSC, Manitoba Clinic?
They have,
adjacent buildings?
This particular lot, as well as the larger one, were assigned for the staff of the Manitoba Clinic. There had been some information that they did offer to the public, although based on the research that I had done, they didn't, and it was assigned. The surface lots that I pointed to for Sherbrooke, numbers 10 through 13 on my page 7, those are offered to the public. There is some surface parking at the Shoppers Drug Mart that's on the other side of the larger lot where people can pay to have parking. And then there's a number of lots along Notre Dame that people can pay to have parking in surface lots that aren't assigned, that aren't parking structures.
Same cap rate for comparable properties around HSC as around St. Pete?
Yes. The exact same cap rate because it's in the exact same parking model. It's our outer downtown.
Offhand, how many surface lots are there like this with assigned parking around HSC? Is it extensive or?
How many parking lots have assigned parking?
Yeah, surface lots with assigned parking.
I wouldn't know offhand, and the trouble with HSC, which is what you can see, we have so many comparables at St. Boniface versus HSC, because HSC has legislation that all of their particular lands are exempt, so they're all under one roll number. So we actually don't get a lot of information around HSC hospital area to find out how much they're making on parking structures, how much they're making on their surface lots, which is why personally, I think $65 a stall for monthly net unit rent at the hospital is very, very low, but because we don't have the market evidence, because of the way the Health Sciences Center is set up within the legislation, we don't actually get income information from them for their surface lots, for their parking structures, and HSC does have some surface lots as well as parking structures on their roll numbers, but because we don't get that information from them, it makes it very hard for us to specifically look at what's happening at HSC. I know how much I've paid for parking at HSC. My children's pediatrician is at the Manitoba Clinic. I know how hard it is to find a spot in that parking structure. So, since we have to look to the market, and the market that what we have at the HSC is very limited, I think $65 is very appropriate, knowing what they charge, knowing what people pay, but because we have to look at the evidence that's available to us, we do have to look elsewhere. So we look at the St. Boniface Hospital, where they have a number of parking lots that are for staff, a number of parking lots that are for the public, and we actually get mailers from them, so you can see the differences there. And you can see that the closer ones that are not operated by the St. Boniface Hospital, that $232 one, that one isn't owned by the St. Boniface Hospital, it's owned by someone else. The remainder of them, comparables number 3 through 9, those are all owned by the charitable organization that is affiliated with the St. Boniface Hospital. So there's other things happening there where they're sort of paying land leases to themselves, which is why also those rates are lower than what is actually being charged at St. Boniface Hospital. But again, this is the market evidence that we have, and I think it's very appropriate at our $65 rate.
And given that it's $65 and where it is, presumably it's fully utilized.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all my questions. Mr. Navarro.
633 McDermott Avenue. If you turn to page 1, you can see a picture of the parking lot, an overhead shot also on page 2. And this is 5,408 square feet, 14 surface parking stalls. We have our rates here for outside lots, or outside areas. We have a median of 130. We gave this parking lot $100 because of its particular location. Expense ratio again of 45%. That gives us expenses of $7,560, a net operating income of $9,240. Capitalized at 5.5%, that gives us an income value of $168,000. At the back portion of the report, you can see the income expenses that were submitted by the Manitoba Clinic. And I am open for questions.
Ms. Murray.
I do have some questions, thank you. I'm looking at your page 6, Mr. Navarro, and it says, and you presented that you're using a 5.5% cap rate, but in your narrative, you say you're using 6.5. Are you using 6.5 or 5.5?
I believe it's 5.5.
Okay. You handle a lot of parking, is that correct, Mr. Navarro?
Fair enough.
And you've done a significant amount of research with respect to parking?
Correct.
Okay. You made some commentary with your questioning towards myself about the differences between the downtown and, hospitals. Would you think there's a difference between that?
Between the downtown and hospital areas. I would think that in terms of land values, there would be a difference. In terms of parking rents, there would be a difference.
With respect to cap rate specifically, I should.
In terms of cap rates, yeah. There would have to be a difference between the downtown and the hospital area.
So you've chosen to use 5.5%, and forgive me to speak to other properties, but we did have a hearing last week where you applied a 5.5% cap rate to a number of parking lots that are in the downtown very close to Broadway, did you not?
Are you talking south of Broadway,
Yes.
east of Donald, or west of Donald?
We're talking about the part that's not in the area close to the legislature building.
Okay, so east of Donald. 5.5 is what we applied there, correct?
And you think that that's a similar location-wise to the hospital to apply the same cap rate?
I would say that 5.5 is probably appropriate for this. I would say in terms of location, this one is probably inferior to those.
Okay. And you handled this previously in 2018, correct?
Correct.
So you were aware that the modeled rates were $70 a stall, and the cap rate was 5% in 2018, correct?
Correct.
And you did withdraw that appeal at $235,000 in 2018, is that correct?
We did, but we approach every assessment cycle differently. We look at the evidence that we look at. And in this case, we determined that we can go ahead with the appeal.
And your evidence has changed since last cycle? Have you received new parking lot sales, information with respect to new cap rate evidence that you were able to come up with? Is there sales that took place to show there were new evidence for cap rates and changes and things?
I would say that in terms of cap rates, nothing has changed. In terms of the information that we had from previous cycle, there haven't been too many transactions. Obviously, we're taking the approach that we're not correct in terms of the capitalization rate that we looked at last cycle. And you've seen our information for this cycle in terms of capitalization rates. In certain areas, we've gone much more aggressive than we did last cycle. We've been successful in some cases, in some cases we haven't been. This is one of those cases where we needed to come back and look at this capitalization rate and this property in general. Not just on the capitalization rate issue, but also on the parking rent issue, because again, we're looking at some comparables which are market comparables in the area that are pointing towards a net that is closer to what we're indicating in our report. We've dealt with the issue of the hospitals. I think there's a lot of underlying issues with the hospitals. Mr. Bresky brought up the issue of parking in the Health Sciences Center. There is a large amount of parking at the Health Sciences Center. And you pay through the nose for that parking, you pay for that convenience. I also have parked there and paid a lot of money there, and for convenience sake, not having to walk too far, I've paid, again, a lot of money for it. I've also gone to St. Boniface, where I've paid through the nose also. That, in my opinion, is a slightly different situation. Health Sciences Center is a large complex that was designed with parking, with intended parking in it. So there are parkades throughout the complex that provide parking to staff, to students, to the general public, and a significant amount of it. So one would maybe ask, is there a need for parking, surface parking out generally just outside the Health Sciences Center? I can't answer that. But one of the indicators is those surface parking lots that are providing market parking in those areas. And for me, it's telling me that the demand is what it is. It's those ones are actually showing what that area is performing like. Now, St. Boniface is a completely different complex. It's generally just one hospital with some newer research facilities that have been built more recently. It wasn't designed with parking to begin with. There are some parking lots just south of the complex where you can park. But most of the parking around St. Boniface is not owned by St. Boniface Hospital. If you park there, you have a harder time, in my opinion, finding parking at certain times. One of the reasons that Dollard actually performs so high is because they are in that perfect situation where there is a lack of parking in the area, and they own a large parking lot. It's a good performing parking lot. I wouldn't compare it to many others. It's a unique situation there.
Two questions, my last two. In your answer just there, you spoke about looking at market comparables and net rents. Do you have any in your brief of net parking rents that you've looked at of actual, what parking lots are actually making in around the hospital area? Do you have any information in your brief to show?
I haven't included that particular area. It's not, when we looked at the downtown or the outside of downtown, we looked directly at the outside of downtown. So we didn't even consider it when we were talking about the hospitals. So the hospitals actually didn't even come into the question because they're so far out of the downtown, in our opinion, that
Now, I understand that when you look at your gross rental rates, but my question is, do you look at the net, what people are making, and come up with comparables for what net is?
only at the time that we do a brief.
And then my last question, you indicated that the Health Sciences Center has a number of parking structures, so there's a lot of parking, and is there a need for it? I know that I have gone with my children due to a number of issues that I've had to take them to different parking structures in the hospital, to see the children's hospital for different things. I go to the Manitoba Clinic for their pediatrician, and I've experienced on a number of occasions in multiple parking structures not being able to find a stall. Have you actually experienced that?
In the Health Sciences Center? No.
Okay. And not at the Manitoba Clinic, have you ever had to park there?
I don't go to the Manitoba Clinic, but I've been to the Health Sciences Center many times, including very recently when I took, I won't even get into it.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Too much information.
Too much information, exactly.
Mr. Whitman,
I think I'm fine, thank you.
Ms. Linklater.
I'm good also, thank you.
You mentioned the difference in cap rate between the downtown and the hospital area. Can you give me a better sense, and this is just, in a way, sort of like background information, I don't understand this lot, but between the downtown and the HSC, if there's a difference in the cap rates, what is the difference in the expense ratio? Like, is one of them far more expensive to operate, yet the revenue is the same, or how does that mix work in the two areas?
Well, I mean, I would say that every particular lot performs slightly differently. If you look at the expense ratios that we've listed here, on page 5. Now, the first thing that we're looking at is 365 William, which we have coming up soon. It has an expense ratio of 51.14%. 172 Donald, again, another large parking complex, 54.92. Now, these are larger ones, and they're performing, again, on average around that 45% mark. Actually, the median is 48%, the average is 47%. Now, in terms of what I've observed for typical parking lots, 6,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet. If it's performing like it should, it's going to have those typical expenses. It's going to have the hydro expenses, the insurance costs, all of those costs that are associated with parking. Snow removal is one of those important ones, and that can vary depending on the size of it. But yeah, there is some consistency in the expense ratios.
And yet there's a big difference between the minimum and the maximum.
Yeah,
What accounts for that big spread?
you're talking about the minimum being Donald Street with 21 stalls, 38.6%. I really can't, it could be what kind of contract they have for snow removal. I really couldn't pinpoint it.
Okay, call my questions. Thank you. That brings us to 268 Sherbrooke Street. Ms. Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're looking at file number 19-2424. We have a roll number of 12-090-448-000. I'm recommending to maintain the 2020 assessed value of $268,000. On page 2, you'll see the information with respect to the parking. We have 24 stalls. And this is located on Sherbrooke Street. If you turn to page 3, it's located on the west side of Sherbrooke Street, just between Portage Avenue and Broadway. On page 4, you'll see subject property photos. On page 6, you'll see land sales. The subject property is 6,184 square feet at $43.34 a square foot. Again, my land sales are on the top of my page. They go from 2012 to 2017, and they range from $20.08 a square foot upwards of $73.74. Comparables number 5 through 8 are all in 2017, and they're $62.55, $49.99, $73.74, and $54.84. Those are closer to the downtown near the U of W, so they're slightly superior locations, which is reflected in our rate of $43.34 a square foot. On page 7, you'll see the income valuation summary. We have 24 stalls with a 5% cap rate. Again, this is our outer downtown cap rate that we applied to this area for a value of $268,000. If you look at the bottom of page 7, you'll see the comparables that we have. Comparables number 1 through 4 are actually closer to they're in the outer downtown, but they're closer to the U of W, so they are a slightly better location than the subject property, which is reflected in our rate. 308 Maryland is quite close to the subject property. 285 Victor, 755 Portage, comparable number 6. That's also very close to the subject property. And then comparables number 7 through 9 are also in our outer downtown parking model on the very, very outskirts of the outer downtown parking model, very close to the suburban boundary, which is very similar to the subject property. The subject property is very close to the suburban boundary of our parking model. So comparables number 7 through 9 actually are just over here. They're by the Disraeli Freeway. They're very small parcels, as you can see, comparables number 8 and 9. They have 12 stalls and 10 stalls. They're small little slivers of gravel lots, and they're making $58 and $62 a stall. So I think the rates that have been applied are quite appropriate. We spoke extensively on cap rates. We have a 5% cap rate. It was the same as the 2018 cycle. Again, cap rate information on page 18. Clearly, none of these are parking lots, but again, the city's position is parking lots are essentially vacant land. When you have a developable parcel, you're going to see a very, very low cap rate because typically if someone's purchasing that parcel, it's not based on the income of the parking. Where you do have higher cap rates on things that are ancillary parking. That's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Navarro.
I don't think I have any questions.
Mr. Whitbread.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the page 11 of your evidence, and the numbers in the bottom right-hand corner. Did you investigate this at all?
Did I look at the mailer?
Yeah.
Yep.
And you see they've only indicated 10 parking spots, 7 at 35, 3 at 85, which
The-
doesn't reconcile with your 24.
So they have 20 stalls, according to the mailer. They're only renting out 10 of them.
So
They're
10
renting
would
out
be
7 of them at $35 and 3 of them at $85. That's a huge change in the rate. And typically when you look at parking in this area, people do typically charge around $80, $85 for parking. So they're charging below market, in my opinion, for gross rates on 7 of their stalls. They're only renting out 10 of them. They say that there's 20, I have not inspected it, so we've been using 24, that's what we have in our system. It wasn't contested last cycle, but I didn't have a chance to inspect it to confirm the 20. This is owned by the adjacent building, and it's, I believe, a heating place, and they do park their vehicles there. So again, that is sort of a business decision, but when we're looking at closer to outside of the downtown, when you're getting closer to the suburbs, parking isn't generally income producing, which is why we've presented land sales as well for that area of properties that have sold, to show if you look at income producing parking and you were to look at, say, the $35 for the 10 stalls, the value of this property could be below $100,000. But that's not really market, because someone would buy this for the land alone at a much higher price based on the land sales that we have.
I saw that in a post
So
reference sale.
that's why when you're getting close to the suburbs, it's hard to look at income producing parking. They are able to get an income on the parking, but it's becoming more of a business use. So then you have to sort of look at what is the land value of this if the income isn't super appropriate, which is why we've presented both of those approaches.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
I wasn't aware that 10 of them may have been taken by the company vehicle, or vacant. So
On
you-
that, sorry, but on that point about the post-reference sale, I would ask that you not include them.
There was a post-reference sale that I included?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even,
29.
oh,
It's-
also that's a multi-role sale. I didn't even mention it.
Makes a lot more sense.
I didn't even mention it, they automatically get populated on brief, I didn't even see it, yes, you guys can cross that off, my apologies, I normally cross it off if I catch it, I clearly didn't catch it when I was putting it together.
And perhaps,
Which is
although
why
it
I
may
did
be
not
done
mention it.
automatically, could you pass on our request that they not be included?
We, again, my apologies, typically we do catch it and try to look at them, I will have to apologize profusely. I've been under very tight deadlines recently, so it was just an error, I usually catch it, I think there's a couple on the rest of the docket that I did catch, so my apologies, I was not trying to mislead anyone.
No
I didn't even point it out, my apologies.
That's good.
Okay, just wait, sorry, I
No,
interrupted.
I understand. So the model would take $46.50 as a monthly net unit rent, plug it in, and away we go on your page 7.
Yes.
Any adjustments that you've made to this model?
No, we've just brought in the income and the land sales for the market value of the property.
Understood. Thank you very much. No further questions.
Ms. Linkletter.
Yes, so Ms. Wareham, you've got 24, as Mr. Whitford pointed out. You've got 24, but the income statement says 20, and you did not inspect.
I did not have a chance to. They have previously said that there's 20 there, but it had never been a discussion between the applicant and myself. We had always just gone with 24. So I didn't realize that it was a point of contention. Mr. Navarro had said he was gonna go and count them and give me a call and let me know, but he didn't actually call me back to let me know if he counted it, so I had
Actually,
to.
I told you at our last hearing. Yeah, 24. I said 24 at that lot. 24. I'm 100% certain that I said it to you.
Okay, we'll move along.
Yep,
You can arm wrestle over it. So this is 6,100 square feet, 6,200 square feet.
according to our records, it's 6184.
So you're showing land sales also because you're thinking at some point this could be developed?
We show land sales because if this was a vacant piece of land, so typically if this was in the suburbs, if it's a vacant piece of land that's used as ancillary parking or needed, it has a land value. And if it's not garnering an income, we can't say that the assessment is $5 because they don't have any income on it. You have to look to land sales, so that's what we've done.
Do you know how long this has been a parking lot for?
I don't know, to my knowledge, I've handled this appeal since 2016, but I'm assuming it's been a parking lot for some time. We have a date as 1983, but I don't know if that was a date of a previous building that was there. So let me look to see if I have any notes. So as far back as 2008, I know that it was a parking lot.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Maybe this will become evident after Mr. Navarro's testimony, but if I look at this lot and the width of this lot, you need to have a certain width in order to have nose-in parking on both sides. And I'm doubtful that you could do that in this lot, particularly if you take a look at page 4 of the top photo. If you put another vehicle on the opposite side, nose in, you're gonna have a lot of trouble backing out and getting out of the lot, aren't you? So I'm really wondering, is this the number of lots at either 20 or even 24?
I, again, have not been able to count it. I have not reviewed any previous aerial photos. I haven't been out there to count it. If Mr. Navarro says that he's been out there and counted 20, then I will believe that he's counted 20. Like I said, I haven't been there, so I can't speak to it. My apologies.
We'll see what Mr. Navarro has to say. You said earlier on that the sales of parking lots are usually for development.
I said there's a range of reasons why parking lots sell. They can sell for a range of reasons, one of them being for development, others are for ancillary uses, others are for income producing, others are for, it's with the building and the building needs parking because it's in the suburbs. There's a multitude of reasons why parking lots sell, why vacant land sells, where cars park, because a lot of the times we have parking lots that are parking lots. We have vacant land that is used as a parking lot. So there's a range of reasons why parking lots do sell. Typically, if you're in the downtown and you have a larger developable parcel, that's what you're going to see it selling for. When you have parcels that are smaller, that can be developed on, it becomes, what are they purchasing it for? Are they wanting to purchase it because they own the building down the street and they want more parking to offer to their tenants? Those different things come into play. So with respect to this particular property, just because it's outside of the downtown, I'm focusing my attentions on what is happening outside of the downtown, which is why I've presented land sales that are on the outside of the downtown, that in my opinion are not really developable parcels, because if you look at my page 6, I think the highest square footage is 12,000 square feet. The rest of them are very similar. Our subject is about 6,000, and almost all of my sales are around, like land sales are around that. So this is a different property than in the downtown. So when I made that comment, I was making that comment with respect to cap rates and where things sell for parking, and that there is a range of cap rates that you will see, and that when you do have a property that's sort of in the inner downtown that's developable, that person is purchasing a property not based on the income of the parking. So it was more commentary on cap rate with respect to having the range of cap rates.
So, have you any notion of what percentage of parking lot sales are from a company that is using it as an income generator to a similar company carrying on with that purpose? Does that tend to not happen?
There are a number of parking lot sales that I've seen, and again, based on the knowledge that I'm looking at, it's more focused on the downtown, but there is a number of parking lot sales that we have in the downtown that sold as a parking lot to a company that's a parking company, albeit there's been commentary that they purchased it for future development way down the line. But a lot of the sales that I've seen, there are some that have sold and they were developed right away. But there's a number of parking lot sales that we have that sold and are still parking lots today. There's a number of 2012 sales in the inner downtown that sold and are still being operated by Indigo. There is a parking lot on, I think it's 55 Gary or 155 Gary. It sold, albeit it was purchased by people who have been in the market for a while and wanted it for long-term development, but it's still a parking lot. So you can't disregard those when they're still operating as a parking lot years past their sale. So to know how many sold from this person to that person, I don't really have full answers on that without calling every single vendor and purchaser and finding out exactly why they purchased their properties, and I just haven't had the opportunity to do that with all of them.
When you retire, I suggest, given your vast knowledge, you dive into research on this.
That's what I dream to do in my retirement.
And the tendency for a lot that is sold in the inner downtown, would that be more for development purposes than in the outer downtown? Would that be more characterized as a sale where it's going to carry on as assigned parking?
I think that's dependent, because if you have a vacant parcel and someone wants to purchase it at the outer downtown and build a building on it, and they don't have any intentions on buying the adjacent building or that they own the adjacent building, there's been a lot of parking lots in the outer downtown that I have seen where they've purchased a piece of vacant land where cars parked, that has either been called vacant land or a parking lot. It becomes a sticky situation in the outer downtown because people do purchase those pieces of vacant land to develop and put buildings on. It's, and you can deal with smaller parcels, I think, outer downtown than you can in the inner. Because when you're building a building downtown and you have a big parcel, you want to build an office building, you know, a high producing, income producing property, because that's what that's built for in that area. When you're in the outer downtown, you do have the ability to build a single tenant, 2-story office building, because that's typical of the market in those areas. So there are those opportunities there that you wouldn't typically see. No one's gonna purchase a parking lot in the downtown typically, a big one, and put, you know, a 2-story office building on it. That just, it's not what the market is.
On Sherbrooke, between Broadway and Portage, or even a little bit farther south, similarly at Maryland, is there a bit of a history in the last 10 years or so of parking lots, small parking lots, getting developed?
Again, I wouldn't be able to speak to it. I do know some, there are land sales that we have. I have seen sales that are south of Broadway that have been developed or replotted into multifamily, things like that, condos. If you look at the parcel, it's the exact same size as the 2 adjacent parcels beside them, and they have buildings on them. So again, we're looking at land sales, and whether these are purchased to develop, purchased to park cars on, purchased to use for their cars and not get any income, whatever they're purchased for, we do have land sales. I've shown them on my page 6, and they are a price per square foot. Whatever that owner chose to purchase that for, they paid that price. So we still have to look at the price that they paid. So whether or not it can be developed, or if there's like a history of development on Sherbrooke, these are sales where people have paid that price per square foot for similar sized parcels. So that's sort of what we're looking to.
Okay, all my questions. Mr. Navarro?
If you turn to page 1 of my presentation, you can see a picture of the property. Just so you know here, the stalls say 2020 on page 2 also. I went out to this parking lot and counted them. It was a tight fit, but there are 24 stalls there. So when I came back, I didn't have time to edit the entire document, but I did edit the actual income calculation. So there are...
Your photo there does show nose-in parking on both sides.
Yep, yeah. It is very tight, but there were 24 stalls there. So we can just actually flip to page 7, because I'm fairly consistent with these reports. Again, we have our comparable monthly gross rates on page 6 and our expense ratios on page 6, but on page 7 we have the calculation. We've chosen a rate of $85 gross. That is on the lower end of our comparables. However, it's also the rate that the owner has specified in his income and expense report. Now the owner has 2 rates, one of $35, which we felt was too low, and one of $85. So we applied an $85 rent to all 24 stalls. gave us an annual income of $24,480. Expense ratio 45%, that gives us expenses of $11,016. Net operating income of $13,464 and a capitalization rate of 6.5 gives us an income value of $207,138. Capitalization rate is high, obviously, because, again, this is outside of downtown. A good portion of the parking lot is actually servicing the business that is beside it, which is a heating and cooling business. In terms of demand for this parking lot, I'm not sure what demand there would be. If there was, it likely would have been developed by now. So we've given it a slightly higher capitalization rate, consistent with the previous one that we looked at, which was 6.75. Again, we're trying to, this is outside of the downtown. I am open for questions.
Ms. Ware?
I do. So you've applied your typical market analysis that you apply to parking lots to this property, correct?
Correct.
So your market analysis is based on income producing parking. Would you think that that's comparable to this property, being its location on Sherbrooke?
Do I think that it's appropriate? I think we've both gone with the same approach, haven't we?
I've presented land sales.
Oh. Again, it's producing income for them, so I took it from the approach that it's an income producing property. I'm not sure if that mix is correct in the income and expense. I saw 6 or 7 company vehicles there. The rest were cars. I don't know what percentage of those were from renters, so I can't really give a answer. I took it that it's an income producing property.
Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Whitbread?
Oh, I'm fine, thanks.
Ms. Licklider?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Mr. Navarro, on page 8, towards the bottom there, you say, as an example, assume a 25% equity investment with minimum debt, mortgage concentrate 4%, investors expected rate of return of 14%. That is how you got at the 6.5%. Do you have anything to substantiate the 25%, 4%, 14%?
I believe that is actually a commentary regarding our look at capitalization rates in general. I don't think it actually deals specifically with this 6.5. We have a blurb that we include in some of our other property types where we look at how we calculate capitalization rates. That is simply something that was included from that, and it's not particular to this property.
You're saying it's just coincidental?
It's just coincidental.
This calculation comes out at the cap rate?
6.5. It shows it. I can actually pull the blurb out of another property where we have that, and it's another property type altogether. And yes, it was simply taken from that. It's simply a look at how we look at capitalization rates, what affects them, but it's not particular to this property in general.
And if I looked at your cap rate study, would I find this in it?
Yes, actually, you can go to the office sector, any property that we've looked at in the office sector, and you'll see, or the retail sector, and you'll see the blurb in there.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Sorry, Mark, I redirected.
Certainly, please do.
Mr. Navarro, I'm just wondering, this is a plumbing and heating business, and beside them is, I think, Creative Manitoba.
Yes.
Are you aware if the heating and company has made any effort to rent out the rest of these stalls?
Within the parking lot? I'm not aware of it. I simply looked at the income and expense mailer and looked at their rates in terms of observing what was there. I only did a count of the parking stalls. So no, I haven't, I don't have an answer to that, maybe Ms. Wareham has.
Do you know how long Parsons has been at this location?
2008, I don't know. I would say that since they purchased the property, yeah, I'm not sure.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
It's actually made me think of another one. You made reference to the 6.5 being up there partly because of the fact that there's required parking for the heating company's vehicles. But if the heating company left that area, sold that building, sold the adjacent parking lot, presumably somebody else, let's make an assumption that somebody else would not be requiring it for parking. Instead would be either assigned, at rent, that sort of thing. That would make a difference to the cap rate.
I think most people would look at this parking lot as an accessory to the building beside it. I think looking at it any other way at this point would be speculating. So, no, if there was another business there, I think they would be requiring that parking also. I'm not sure that there's any demand there for development at this point, simply because this property along with the parking lot are one entity. The building north of that is another one. So there isn't even an assembly there at this point. So again, you start getting into the issue of speculating at this point. And, I just actually wanted to address the issue of the blurb. If you look at the previous brief, you'll see the same blurb in there. So it is something that we just copied over.
Okay. Redirecting back over here, would you agree accessory use is the way to look at this?
They do use it as an accessory use, and to speak to the question of Ms. Linklater, whether they attempt to rent out the parking. On my page 4, there's a sign actually on the fence that says monthly parking available. So they are attempting to rent it out. So if they now have a property where they own the building next door, it's helpful to them to have places to park. They own a piece of vacant land that they're earning an interim income on because they can offer parking to people in the area. So it's one of those things where this may not be income producing, but there is a value to it. And again, they can get an income essentially on their vacant land. Typically people who have vacant land that own vacant land, they just have a piece of vacant land that they don't do anything with. In this particular situation, these owners benefit from this not only for their business, but they also benefit from owning this piece of vacant land because it's paved and they can have people park on it. So there is some value there, and that, in my mind, decreases the risk that they have because they are using it for themselves, it's an ancillary use, but they need it. So there isn't really, to them not having it is a risk. To them having it is beneficial to their business, it's beneficial to them because they can rent it out to other people, and clearly they're able to because their mailer says that they charge $35, which is typically below market, to 7 people, and they're able to charge $85 to 3 people. So if someone wanted to come along and rent out all these stalls for $85, they could do so. So I think these owners are benefiting from this lot in multiple ways.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move along. How about we take a short break? 5 to 10 minutes, and then we will resume. All right, we will resume with 215 Good Street. And on this one, I see we have an issue of classification as well as assessed value. that correct, Mr. Navarro?
I would actually ask that you confirm the classification issue.
Okay. In that case, Ms. Ware, when you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just let me make a note. Okay. This is file number 19-2652. We have a roll number 12-091-607-500. This is 215 Good Street. We have a 2020 assessed value of $690,000. If you look on page 2, you'll see this is a subject. The subject is a service parking lot with 52 stalls. We had a 2018 assessed value of $743,000, which was withdrawn at the Board of Revision. On page 3, you'll see aerial photos of the subject property. It's located on Good Street between Colony Street and Good, and it's also between St. Mary and Broadway. It's in very close proximity to a number of parking lots that service the U of W. Although this parking lot does not service the U of W, I believe it services an office building at 226 Osborne. They have the same ownership. On page 6, you'll see land sale comparables. These are properties that are in close proximity to the subject. We have 16,110 square feet at $42.83 a square foot. We have a number of properties that are in very close proximity to the subject that are recent sales, all in 2017, comparables number 5 through 8 on that chart. Those are all in very, very close proximity, as I said. They're on Young, Spence, and Colony. The subject property actually is also on Colony. It's between Good and Colony. On page 7, you'll see our income valuation summary. We have 52 stalls at a monthly net unit rent of $55.25 a stall. The reason there was a decrease from 2018 is because our, as I stated previously, our monthly net unit rents for the outer downtown, we saw a decrease in rental rates. So this was the net rent per stall. I should say in 2018, the modeled one was higher. We have the same cap rate at 5%. So we have a value this cycle of $690,000. On page 7, at the bottom of page 7, you'll see our comparables. The subject is 215 Good Street. They have a typical expense ratio around that 45%. They're making $53.24 a stall, and we're at $55.25 a stall. Our model is performing very well with respect to this subject property. Typically in the past, the subject property has been making significantly more than our model, and for whatever reason this cycle, the net per stall rate that they've reported is much lower than normal, so I'm not sure if something was happening with that property. Again, comparables also on this page that are in close proximity are comparables number 2 through 4. And like I stated previously, 308 Maryland, comparable number 6, those are in the suburbs. They're very, very far away, so they're significantly inferior locations because they aren't able to garner that casual revenue typical of properties that are in close proximity to the U of W. So if a buyer wanted to purchase a parking lot in close proximity, they could be offering casual parking and to students. Comparables number 7 through 9, again, these are on the very outskirts of our outer downtown model. These are gravel lots, not paved. The subject is paved. The subject has plugs. Comparables number 7 through 9 do not have plugs. They are not paved, and they are, like I said, near the Disraeli Freeway, on the outskirts, gravel, and they're making $66, $58, $62 a stall. So I think our monthly net unit rent at $55.25 is bang on. I think 5% is appropriate. Again, this is our outer downtown. It's very close to our inner downtown parking model. It's typically on the outskirts, and it is in a good location. Like I said, it's in very close proximity to the U of W, so there is less risk involved. If you were someone who was wanting to purchase a parking lot for income producing capabilities, you would be able to have a market there for your parking. If you turn to page 14, you'll just see a number of comparable properties showing typical growth rates in the area of the U of W. And this also shows that there are income producing parking in the area operated by parking management companies. So you'll see that the in-park charges at lot number 6, $130, as well as hourly and casual evening revenue at 336 Young. They have different monthly rates available as well as casual. At 520 Portage, which is in close proximity to the subject, again, $130. We have another Homer's plot, the Bueller Center, 242 Good Street, again, very close proximity to the subject property. We're at 215 Good, this is 242 Good, operated on by Indigo on page 24. The Elam Chapel, operated by Indigo on the corner of, I believe it's Spence, right near Portage Avenue there, close proximity to the subject. So all of that also goes to show that there is income producing parking. There's a number of parking management companies operating parking in this area because it is in such close proximity to the U of W. So I think our assessed value is absolutely appropriate in this situation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Navarro?
I have no questions.
Mr. Whitbread?
Maybe just help me, I'm a little bit confused on your page 7.
My apologies.
No, I may be confused. I'm looking at your monthly rent, let's use number 3,
Okay,
$125.
okay,
If I use an expense ratio of 62%,
okay. My apologies, and I sometimes make this mistake when I forget to very thoroughly explain my comparables, so that's my fault.
can I ask my question?
Okay, you're gonna say that it doesn't add up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me ask that question. It doesn't add up. Can you explain that, please?
Sorry, I knew the question you were gonna ask because it has been asked on many occasions. So the way we model our parking is on a net basis. Because there are so many different parking arrangements that happen in parking agreements, they're operated, as ancillary parking, they're operated with casual parking, monthly parking. It's hard to develop what a market gross is and then subtract expenses to come up with a net. So that is not how we model our parking. We model our parking, we go to the net operating incomes reported on the mailers, and we take it from the net operating income line, divided by the number of stalls, divided by 12, which gives you these that are in this column here.
So this 125 by 38%, which would be the net, has no bearing on that number you
It's
have.
just information. So what we produce is we produce what they typically charge, so monthly and casual parking, what they're reporting on the mailers, to show these are typical gross rates. The expense ratios that are reported based on the expenses divided by the gross income that's reported. Because what we do is we model the net, we also model the expense ratio to figure out what a typical expense ratio is for surface parking. So there isn't a correlation math-wise between the gross rate, the expense ratio, and the net. The stabilized NOI per stall per month is straight from the mailer. The expense ratio is straight from the mailer.
Asked and answered. It might, if you've been asked this a number of times, it might clarify if you just explain that a little bit for us.
And it's my apologies, I normally do, but because it's almost the end of the cycle, it was my apologies for being lax in my presentation. I do normally, when there are new people, I go through that, but it is my fault that I
No worries.
forget it's the end of the
I
cycle.
have to go through it for some of the people who aren't new too.
I know, I just sometimes in the efforts of speeding things along and not taking up more of your time hearing my voice say the same thing over and over again. So my apologies.
No worries. Apology accepted. I'm done.
You're done? Ms. Linklater?
Yes. Ms. Ware, can you explain again concerning the cap rate, why it changed from the previous cycle to now? Because I think your downtown was 5 previously, and you've changed it to 4.5, and your outer downtown was 5.5, and now it's 5.
No, our inner and outer downtown for 2018, so previous to 2016, we had 3 cap rates. We had an inner downtown, an outer downtown, and a suburban. For 2016 and 18, our inner downtown and our outer downtown, we had the same cap rate, but based on stuff we've been looking at and looking at rates decreasing, sales, why things are selling in those areas, we reflected that there is a little bit more risk to be on the outskirts of the downtown. Also because of what's happening in the inner downtown with land sales, development of True North Square, things like that. We found that there is less risk in the inner downtown and that there is more you're close to the MTS Center, you're close to a number of locations because of a lot of revitalization that's happening in the downtown. People are now coming downtown more for more things. True North has purchased the Burton Cummings Theater, so that has received a renovation. So there's a lot more things happening downtown. So we felt that the move of the cap rate from our inner downtown was warranted, which is why we left our outer downtown at the 5%, and we've gone back to having 3 different cap rates. So our outer downtown, for this particular property in 2018, it was 5%.
Thank you. That's it.
Similar to the last one where there was the question of whether this is an accessory use for an adjacent building. These people are workers at 226, is it?
Correct.
Osborne Street. Does that limit the development potential of this? And I might as well combine both my questions into sort of one. Across the street, there's an awful lot of vacant land. Is that all parking?
Like the grassy areas? Are we talking about right here?
Yeah, what is that?
I'm assuming it's green space, grass. I haven't looked into it, but it definitely isn't parking because it's not paved and there aren't cars parked there. I have not looked into it, but to answer your first question, 226 Osborne, this property is actually, or the office building is in the downtown zoning bylaw. And the downtown zoning bylaw does not require any parking for your office building. It's a benefit to a person who owns a building to have parking there to offer their tenants, but that's a benefit to the building. It is not a requirement of the bylaw to have off-street parking for tenants, customers, and also at 226 Osborne, they have a vacant parcel beside them where cars park. They have parking indoors at that building, and they also have parking on their, surface parking on the particular roll. So not only do they have a vacant parcel that they use to park cars, they have indoor parking available within the building, and they also have a number of parking stalls on the roll number at 226 Osborne. So they don't require the parking. It's nice that they have this. They don't require the parking on their roll. It's nice that they have it. So if we're looking at market value and a willing buyer and purchaser on the market, if I was going to purchase this could be on the market to someone who's not interested in buying an office building and a parking lot. They could buy a parking lot and operate it to students, hire Impark to operate it. You see that happening in this area. So it's used as an ancillary use. It's not required to be used as such.
Okay. And has there been much development in this vicinity recently of vacant lots, parking lots?
Not to my knowledge, but I haven't looked into what's been developed in the area. I do know that there's been some development on the north side of St. Mary where they built the Bueller Center. They turned a few parking lots into building that building. I know there was a few pieces of vacant land on the north side of Portage near the U of W where they built their new facilities there. So there has been, but I haven't looked into it thoroughly, just things that I've seen sort of offhand while researching land sales and what's typically happened with them.
And do you know what date these photos are?
What date these photos? The aerial photos on page 3 are from 2018 because I think they did the flyover in the summer of 2018. We do them every 2 years. We get our aerial photos done, so I don't usually copy and paste. Even though I have the same properties every cycle, I go through the effort of taking the most recent aerial photos. I try to get the most recent Google Street Views, so even though I have the same properties, I do take new street views, new aerial photos, because we do have them done and Google does go through, and so these ones are 2018, these aerial photos.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Navarro.
If you turn to page 2, you can see an overhead picture of the property. 16,110 square feet, 52 stalled parking lots, C2 zoning. If you turn to page 6, you can go over the income calculation for the property. We've gone with a rate of $100 gross for the 52 stalls, giving us an annual income of $62,400. 45% expense ratio gives us $28,080 in expenses. Net operating income of $34,320, and a capitalization rate of 6. In terms of our net operating income, we are fairly close to each other. We have an income value of $572,000. that is my presentation.
Ms. Wareham?
I have no questions.
Ms. Whitbread?
I'm sorry to be the mathematician in the room, Mr. Severo. You're page 6. 52 times 100. And my calculator did not come out to 62.
Did I make a mistake there? I'm just gonna
It
go over this.
significantly reduces your net income if you correct it.
Let me just see what I did here.
That math is right.
Yeah, it's 100.
That math is right.
Yeah.
52 times 100?
Times
52
12.
times 100 times 12.
Mr. Severo, I
Yeah.
apologize. I knew I missed something.
Don't apologize. It's one of those things, if you don't deal with parking, it's one of those things we've taken as granted, so it's our fault for not explaining it.
I was just testing it.
Other questions?
No, I'm good.
Ms. Lickford?
Just one, 2. Mr. Navarro, did you inspect?
I have been on this property, yes.
And the cap rate of 6?
Slightly aggressive, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you.
Um, 100 as the gross rent?
Correct.
Is that aggressive in one direction or another, or?
You're talking about the cap rate or the
No, no, I'm
commentary that I
talking-
made regarding the cap rate?
No, I'm talking about your assumption about the effective gross rent per stall being 100.
That's actually what they charge.
That is what they charge?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a redirect when you're done your questioning.
I am done my questioning. Go ahead.
Thank you. Based on that line of questioning, Mr. Navarro, $100, do you note, based on the information that I presented in my brief, in your review of parking lots in the area, do you think that that's below a market rate typically for what's being seen?
For this area?
Yeah. I believe on your page you indicate that an average of this area is typically around 130?
I really don't think it's that much of an issue in terms of overall, because I mean, we came out to almost the same net operating income, did we not?
Yeah, I'm just asking the questions on the $100 being aggressive. And how long have they charged $100?
No, I
a stall?
actually didn't say aggressive for the,
Oh,
I said for the cap rate.
I said aggressive.
I meant
Oh.
his question on the $100 being aggressive, that's why the redirect.
No, I said, no, I didn't think it was aggressive, it's what they were charging.
Yeah, and so my question on that commentary, have they been charging $100 per stall at this location for a number of cycles?
I'm not sure, but they may have been, yeah. Again, this is a residential neighborhood. They are servicing that building at 226 Osborne. There is only so much of a market in this area for parking, and again, there is on-street parking, so you can choose to park for free, or you can choose to pay for parking where you don't have to really.
Do they offer free parking in that area, or would there be a parking limit to how long you can park on those streets, being its close proximity to the U of W? Typically, when you're in close proximity on a number of streets near the U of W, there is a limit on hour-long to hour parking, is there not? So you can't really choose to park for
Sure
free.
about this particular area. I don't know how close it is to the U of W. We still have to, it's a fair walk to the U of W still.
Those are my questions. Thank you for the opportunity to redirect, Mr. Chairman.
No problem. I have no other questions. That concludes this one. Our next one is 365 William Avenue. Ms. Wareham, when you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're looking at file number 19-3891, roll number 13-070-145-800. The address is 365 William Avenue. The 2018 value was $1,630,000, which was withdrawn from the Board of Revision for the 2018 cycle. If you turn to my page 2, I'm recommending to maintain the 2020 assessed value of $1,513,000. We have 97 parking stalls on this property. If you turn to page 3, you'll see an aerial photo of the subject property showing its location on the north side of William Avenue, just across the street from Dagmar. It is in close proximity to the Red River campus. If you look over here at my photo, this is the subject property, and this is the Red River campus, just across the street from where we are right now. On page 4, you'll see subject property photos. On page 6, you'll see land sale comparables. This property is 29,379 square feet. And if you look at the land sales in the area, again, my land sales at the top of page 6 range from 2012 to 2017. These are all properties, the land sales that I've provided are sort of on the outskirts of the downtown, similar to the subject property. And we have $51.50 a square foot, which I think is easily evidenced and defended with market information shown in my chart at the top of the page. On page 7, you'll see our income valuation summary. Again, this is in our outer downtown parking model, so our monthly net unit rent had gone down from $70 for this particular property to $65, which explains the decrease in rate from 2018 to 2020. Our cap rate has remained the same at 5%. So we have 97 stalls at $65 a stall with a 5% cap rate for a value of $1,513,000. At the bottom of my page 7, these are comparables, net rates from income mailers that people have provided to show what is happening in the market and in the area. The first comparable, 508 Hargrave, 129 Dagmar, 490 Hargrave, 520 Hargrave. This does not offer casual parking. These are the multitude of lots. If you look over at my aerial photo, I can point out. So it's the multitude of these lots here. And they're operated for WRHA staff, and it is not offered for any parking after hours or casual parking, and it is a lease with the WRHA staff who park in that building. And it works out, so it's very close proximity, it works out to $107.58 a stall, and we're at 65. The next comparable is comparable number 2, very close proximity to the subject, just down the street from the subject. But it's a gravel lot, so it's down Hargrave, and it's on the corner of Hargrave and McDermott. Comparable number 2, and they're getting $96.91. And they are operated by Impark there, and that is a gravel lot. At 307 Elgin, if you look at my aerial photo, this is the subject property. 307 Elgin is right here. It's on the corner of Princess and Elgin. That's operated by Indigo, and they have reported on their 2017 mailer that they're making $73.74. 370 Smith is closer to the downtown, but it's a very small, awkward, triangular parcel by the Burton Cummings Theater, operated by Impark. 365 William is the subject property. They're making $59.26 a stall. They're making very close to our $65. I think if you're looking at market value, our model isn't hitting exactly what they're making, but again, we're not looking at actuals, we're looking at what's happening in the market. Again, comparables number 6 through 8. These are significantly inferior properties on the outskirts of downtown. We've already discussed them. They're very small parcels. They're gravel lots, they don't have any plugs, and they're making $66, $58, and $62 a stall. They're in the same parking model, but they're significantly in inferior locations. And I believe our $65 is appropriate. Again, our cap rate is 5%. It was 5% last cycle. The only thing that has changed on this assessed value from the 2018 value that was withdrawn was the net rate per stall, which has decreased. That's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Navarro.
Did you have a chance to inspect this property?
I inspected this property on October 25th, 2013, because the owner typically reports that there's 91 stalls here. And I believe I had the appeal at that time with Mr. Reimer at Altus, and I went out and counted those stalls because They had said 91, the owner still says 91, and Mr. Reimer confirmed when he counted them at the time in 2013 that there were 97 stalls there. I have not gone out and counted since though.
Those are my questions.
Mr. Whitbread,
Nothing.
Ms. Linklater.
Just want to point out on page 11.
Am I in trouble?
No, but you've got the private user ID and, sorry.
Again, I always cross that out. I just did a whole exchange last night where I crossed them out. It was my mistake. I apologize. There are things that we miss, and that is one of them, so my apologies. We have been getting questioned on our doctoring of INEs from applicants of whether we've altered the information, so it's now become a gray area of whether we can cross that off because we're getting questioned on if we altered the information that's been given to us, so that is my apologies. Typically, if I print our letters for non-cooperation purposes, I remember to take it out, but when people give us the letter back, sometimes I miss that, and in this situation I did, so my apologies to everyone involved.
That's all my questions.
Since you raised the INE doctoring issue, can I ask you a question that I asked previously, just to make sure that I'm getting the same answer each time, in order to understand that issue? It is my understanding from previous discussion that there are 2 screens that you can go to and take a screen print, and that they wind up in the brief here. There is a view screen and an edit screen. And it is the edit screen that may have altered numbers on it because it's been stabilized. The view one, though, should be exactly as submitted, which would be what we would expect to see. Is that correct?
Now, that commentary doesn't have any bearing in this particular situation. That commentary has a bearing on when someone has submitted a mailer on our online system. So they've
Okay.
gone into our online system and they've typed up the information. In this particular situation, they sent us a PDF or an email or sent it in the mail or dropped off a paper copy or faxed it, and the paper copy is saved as a file in our system. We just open that PDF and put it on our brief. The commentary that
So
you
we
were
need to look
speaking
for a
of,
whiteout.
the edit and view screen, is strictly with respect to
Correct.
online.
Correct. That is my understanding.
So this one, these are just paper copies, and I should have caught the private user ID and crossed it off. I don't think that's doctoring, I think that's protection of information, and normally I do catch that, and again, I didn't, and I'm kind of annoyed at myself. But the question of the online submission, there are differences in the screens, and one is an internal thing and one is what was submitted to us. With respect to whether or not people highlight things on mailers or block out private information, I don't consider that doctoring, but they are now questions that were being asked by applicants, which is making things probably, in my opinion, a little bit more difficult than they need to be.
Okay. That's all my questions. Mr. Navarro?
Okay. This is 365 William again, and on page 1 you can see a street view picture. On page 2 you have the overhead picture, 29,379 square feet, 97 stalls. Also confirmed I counted those as well, so there are 97 stalls there. M1 light industrial zoning. On page 5, you can see our comparable rents and our expense ratios. On page 6, you'll see something a little bit different. So I don't know if anybody has seen one of these before. I typically don't do them. What I've done here is I've looked at 3 years of income and expenses. And the reason for it is it highlights the situation, the particular situation in this parking lot. After having a conversation with the owners, they had indicated to me that they had lost potential income by losing a contract with Red River College. And that contract ended at the end of 2015. So 2016, in 2017, we see the effects of it. We can't look at 2018. However, these 3 years are basically indicating the effects of losing that contract on this parking lot. So I've stabilized the income at $140,828 gross. And again, that is the effective gross income. In terms of expenses, I've stabilized the expenses at $77,508. That is an expense ratio of 55%. Gives us a net operating income of $63,319. I've applied the same capitalization rate as the city at 5%, and I get an indicated market value of $1,266,380. Apart from that, just the typical cap data that we've included, and I've also included the 3 years of income expenses that I've looked at here. I'll also say that I made the same mistake as Ms. Wareham and included the ID on here, which I shouldn't have.
If I can request, and I think Mr. Navarro would too, could we all cross it off from the briefs, including the clerk copies, so that when they get submitted to the file, it's not actually available to the public? If that would be acceptable to.
Which page am I looking at then?
For my brief, it was page, I think Ms. Linklater said 11,
There's no number, but it's in the number.
and Mr. Navarro's was,
I have 3 years there, so we would have to go into the appendix and look at all the 3 years that I've submitted for.
Oh, it's a short one. Is it not? Yeah. We just showed it.
I just know that people can come in and request information from what happened on a file and have it produced to them, so.
Anything further?
That is my
That
presentation.
is it. Questions?
Just a few, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Moore, I believe you sort of said this in your presentation. You've handled a lot of parking this cycle, correct? I think this is the first time since, the end of September that I've seen you use an actual income stabilization versus your market analysis. Is this the first time we've seen that?
I think you've seen it in the past. I think this is the first time this cycle.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, is there a reason that you deviated from looking at market to looking at actuals when we're talking market value?
I think this is the first time that we can actually have a look at the effects of vacancy on a property. And this is where we actually know that vacancy has occurred. The owner has told us that vacancy has occurred. They haven't told us exactly the quantity of stalls that were affected. However, it's clearly indicated in the income that there was an effect on the income of this property.
As a comparison, did you go through the effort of going through your typical approach at, 130, 140, 185, whatever your analysis is for gross rates?
Right there, I'll cut you off.
Okay.
That would have been overstating the income of the property.
Okay.
So
So
we
you
know that
did
there's.
go through it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
My next question is, you indicated in a previous property, and I know that we've discussed this at length, typical expense ratios are 45%. You've indicated today that that's a stable 45%. Would you not think that 55% is on the higher side based on that analysis?
So
from
these
what's
are,
happening
this
in
is
the market?
based on actuals, so the stabilized expense ratio is 55%. What I would say to that is again, the expense ratio is simply a ratio, correct? So what we're seeing is the effect of the lowering of the income on the expense ratio.
My commentary, though, is based on your market analysis. It is on the higher side, correct?
Well, okay, so in most situations that we look at where there aren't vacancy issues. 45% is typical. But however, what I'm trying to demonstrate here is the effect of lowering that income on the expense ratio. Again, the two are a ratio of each other. So if you lower the income, that expense ratio will go up.
Yep.
Okay?
I-
Because your expenses stay stable.
I understand the math. My questions were, that's on the higher side based on your market analysis of expense ratio.
Based on the market, but we looked at that. This is why we've chosen to go this way.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Mr. Whitbread?
That's exactly where I was trying to go, is I think what it demonstrates on a business property like this is you can lose a big contract, but your expenses
It's
are
same.
fixed pretty much. They're
Exactly.
pretty much similar. In fact, a little bit higher, as you've indicated.
Yeah,
And so that's a fair commentary in a situation like this.
correct.
Now, you can't predict the future, but do you foresee that
Gradually, I
staying
think,
lower?
hopefully going into the next cycle, that will correct itself. I don't know, I suspect the contract was substantial because it took a fair chunk of income out of the property. So, you know, maybe if we can get more students driving to Red River College, I don't know.
That's speculation.
That's
I mean,
speculation,
I
yeah.
understand
Yeah.
that, but hopefully we'll see an uptick in that
Yeah.
number in the future as they
Correct.
go after more customers.
Correct.
I see.
Um,
Okay.
I mean, one thing that you can always do as a strategy, and this is just commentary, is that sometimes when they try and rent up a parking lot that they see is underperforming, they will simply just cut the rates. They'll drop them
Mhm.
to below market simply to fill them up and then start gradually raising them.
Thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Linklater?
Yes, again, probably speculation, but since they lost the Red River, who else would be a big enough client in this area?
I don't know City of Winnipeg.
Yeah.
There's certainly enough municipal offices in the downtown that, you know, even people in the Exchange District, I mean, it's a hike, but, I mean, it's not that far. I mean, I think I clocked myself one time from there to the corner of Princess and William, and it wasn't that long. It didn't take me that long, so.
I just want to redirect.
Mm-hmm.
This is where you were questioning Mr. Navarro on his 55% expense? Is it 55? Yes. So what would you say is typical average?
The typical is 45%. Mr. Navarro and myself have been in full agreement on that for probably the past 2 cycles. There is a range, albeit, but based on what we've looked at when we're looking at market, typical is 45%. And I agree with him, it is a ratio, so when incomes go down, it goes up. But again, when you're looking at market and you have a variety of parking lots and this information would have gone into our model, it still is coming out with 45% as typical. Some are under, some are over, but we're looking at market.
Thank you. That's all the questions.
I have no questions, but just a comment. You said that this is the first time you used this spreadsheet.
This cycle, I actually have used it in the past, yeah.
Thank you for using it. I absolutely love this spreadsheet. Other agents use it, and I find it very useful and a really good snapshot that shows everything, including the city side. So, having no questions, that concludes this one. That brings us to 440 Main Street. As well.
Thank you. We're looking at file number 19-2586, roll number 13-060-868-000. This is 440 Main Street. We have this identified as a surface parking lot, although I discovered last cycle we should not have this as a surface parking lot. Unfortunately, I did not have time to correct the issue before I went on mat leave, so we are still calling it a surface parking lot, but similar to 2018, in 2020, we have valued this as vacant land. The reason being, we have 5 stalls, as you can see on page 2. We call this a surface parking lot, but essentially this is a piece of vacant land located on the southwest corner of McDermott Avenue and Main Street. If you look at my aerial photo on page 3, this has some surface parking, but it's the patio of the bar next door. So to value this as income producing parking doesn't make any sense, because the value of this property at 5 stalls at our typical modeled rate with a 4.5% cap rate is not reflective of what this property would sell for in the market, and it's also not being used as really income producing parking. So we have to look at this as a piece of vacant land, which myself and Mr. Navarro were in agreement on last cycle, as I made a recommendation in last cycle to reflect that with respect to the land value. You will note that I did cross out the oh no, this was the wrong brief. I was gonna say I crossed out the post-reference sale, but it's not this one. On page 6, you'll see my sales. We have 6,388 square feet of land. Our land sales are shown at the top chart. We have parking lot sales as well as vacant land sales. I would point to the vacant land sales as the most comparable. So comparables number 6 through 9. We have $78.36 on the low side and $142.28 on the high side. These are pieces of vacant land that are very similar in size. 220 Main Street is on Main Street. It only has access via back alley from, I believe it's Graham. So you actually have to go down the back alley off Graham to get in behind there, and it's just a very small parcel between 2 buildings, limited development potential at 5,000 square feet. So it's significantly less than what we have at 106, because this is a corner property on the corner of McDermott and Main in close proximity to Portage and Main. So we think that the $106.14 is very appropriate for this particular property. Again, there's no income on this because we are not looking at this as income parking. We're essentially looking at this as a piece of vacant land. That's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Navarro.
Can you tell me where 44 Hargrave is?
44 Hargrave is just south of Broadway on Hargrave Street, almost near Assiniboine Avenue.
Okay.
So it's located on the west side of Hargrave between Broadway and Assiniboine, but closer to Assiniboine.
Now, there is an office building right beside this property, is there not?
I think it's an apartment building. There may be an office building on the other side, but the one that I'm looking at in my photo, there's, I believe, an apartment building, a vacant piece of land, the parking lot, and then office building.
Okay, so what is this building, or what is this property? Just vacant land?
I believe it was vacant land, and then it was purchased, our notes say it's an arm's length sale. That the purchasers purchased the property, like other properties in close proximity, but not in the same transaction. They possibly purchased them to potentially redevelop something. Those are the notes that we have on the property.
Would you say that this is rather on the high side for a parking lot, or a vacant parcel of land in this area?
Again, there was maybe some motivation there, but we're at $106 and that was at $142. And it's in a much better location, the subject property, than that.
And Carlton is located where?
It is located on the west side of Carlton between Graham and St. Mary. It's across from Trudeau Square.
Those are my questions.
Mr. Whitburn.
I'm just trying to place this. Is there a nightclub in one of these buildings right there onto that patio?
It's the one right next door. So the building right next door to it, I believe it used to be called Whiskey Dicks, and now I think it's the Palomino Club when they moved from Portage Avenue to this location. So I believe it's now the Palomino Club.
World famous.
It's no longer on Portage anymore, so
I'm
it's
sure.
there. So it is the patio for that bar.
So that doorway going in with the canopy over it is into the nightclub?
Yes.
And then this parking lot with those cars is not part of the parcel that has that wood structure on it, or does it?
So the cars
Yeah.
that are along the wood structure are the ones that are on the parcel. The cars that are on this side of it are part of the other parcel, I believe, if
Where
I'm,
do
no.
you-
Yeah, so the cars that are there, if you look at the aerial photo, it's slightly offset from the building, so we don't actually consider those cars part of it, because typically, for us to assess a parking stall on a property, we consider the majority of the stall has to be on that property.
Okay.
If the majority is not on the property, we typically don't assess it, because there are situations where parking lots that have multiple roll numbers on them and lot lines, so you have to sort of decide which stall is going to each, so we typically aren't looking at those ones.
Where are you getting those other photographs you've got there?
You're looking at Mr. Navarro's.
I shouldn't. Should I? Sorry.
So if you turn to my page
Yes.
for those photos are there. So essentially, to our knowledge, the cars that are parked there are like the property owner's cars. I think there's some like office space in that building. I can't speak to that building because I have not reviewed it in full. It's not in our portfolio of properties. I believe it's a retail property. But
I think I have my answer.
Okay.
Page 3, bottom corner. It appears that whole wood balcony piece is part of 440 Main Street. Yes?
oh yes, that the
Yeah, that's what I
whole
was
thing
trying
is a
to
patio.
establish,
Yes,
whether
I'm
that
sorry.
was part of the
Yeah, the
nightclub
whole
rule.
patio is, it's not
Gotcha.
part of the nightclub roll.
Okay.
It's part of our roll, but it's used by the nightclub because the the building
Yes.
and this have the same ownership.
It's awkward
So
just
what
because
they-
of the skewing of the aerial photos.
The
and
reason this is a
lines.
parking lot is because when I think it was Whiskey Dick's, that they didn't have that patio there,
Right.
but the owner chose to build a patio, and it's been there for some time now, to have that space for the nightclub.
Gotcha.
So we just haven't changed it.
Yep, I
And this
understand.
time, now that I'm back at work, I will be changing it to a vacant commercial piece of land, so we aren't having to sit here and talk
Yeah.
about whether it's parking or not.
And just to confirm what you said, that little rectangle beside it with the truck in it, on the bottom of page 3.
Yes.
That is not this roll, that is
That
a
is
different
a-
roll.
yes.
Thank you. Answers my question.
Ms. Lichter?
So to the best of your knowledge, this is still being used as parking?
The 5 stalls, yeah, people park there.
I
That's all
think
my
it may be
questions.
staff parking, but it doesn't matter, it's still a parking.
I have no questions. Mr. Navarro?
On page 1, you can see a picture of the outside. Again, you can see the patio section with some parking stalls beside it. There's an overhead shot. It's right on the corner of McDermott and Main Street. And this is 6,388 square feet in the character zoning area. On page 5, you can see that we've gone with the direct comparison approach. And we have a number of sales here that we've looked at. We've come out to an average of $70.26, median of $62.34. We've applied a rate of $75 per square foot to this lot. So $75 times 6,388 square feet is $479,100. 479,000 rounded. That's my presentation, thank you.
Ms. Murray?
I have no questions, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Whitbread?
Nothing, thank you.
Mercy. That concludes this one, so I have no questions. Lastly, question mark Donald Street. Somewhere on Donald. Is where?
We're looking at file number 19-2468, roll number 12-092-252-8300. This is a surface parking lot, which I did inspect on December 22nd, 2015. I'm recommending to maintain the 2020 assessed value of $2,311,000. The 2018 value that was not appealed is $2,104,000. If you turn to page 2, you'll see this is a surface parking lot with 24,177 square feet, and we have on record as 84 parking stalls, which we have typically used. If you look at page 3, you'll see an aerial photo of the subject property. If you want to just look over here, because we're going to get to it, you're going to question me on it. This property and the subject, and the one just on the corner of Broadway and Donald, the owner owns both of them and operates them together, so the mailer is actually for both of those properties, and that one on the corner of Broadway and Donald was actually heard last Wednesday. On page 4, you'll see subject property photos. So again, this is located on the east side of Donald, just south of Broadway. On page 6, you'll see land sale comparables. The subject property is 24,177 square feet, and we have a land value of $95.59 a square foot on this property. If you look at the larger size comparables, comparable number 1 through comparable number 5, these are on the larger side. These are all older sales, 2012, 2014, and 2016 is the most recent. 2016 was True North Square. Obviously that was redeveloped at $96.98 a square foot. If you were to time adjust all of these sales, because as you see from 2012 through 2017, land sales are increasing, so those 2012 ones would be time adjusted much higher than that $60, but they are older sales. I think $95.59 is very appropriate based on the information that we've seen in the market for the inner downtown land sales that have happened. If you turn to page 7, you'll see we have 84 stalls with a net operating income of $103,975. We have a 4.5% cap rate for this property for a value of $2,311,000. On the bottom of my page 7, you'll see income comparables. Comparable number 1 is 91 Edmonton Street. Similar to the subject property, it is on the south side of Broadway, and it's making $154.64 a stall. 65 Kennedy is again south of Broadway. It's an inferior location. It only has back lane access, as well as it doesn't offer any casual parking. It's offered just to tenants of a building. And it's used by, it's the same ownership, and they use it for their tenants. So it is inferior to the subject property because the subject property is operated by M-Park. There is casual parking available to it. The remainder of the comparables number 3 through 15 are on the north side of Broadway. They charge higher rates on the north side of Broadway. You'll note that they're much, much higher. We're up and around the 200, 150, 120 sort of per stall range, and we're at $103 at the subject property. On page 11, you'll see the income mailer that was submitted. Again, this was submitted encompassing 2 roll numbers. As you see on page 13, they are saying that there are 2 separate roll numbers here for the subject property. The income information is on page 16. Page 18 are the subject, the actual rates of the subject property. This is M-Park lot 90. They charge $160 a stall here. At a typical expense ratio of 45%, you're looking at around $88 a stall, and we're at 100 based on the information that we have. There is a wait list for parking, and they do offer hourly, daily, and evening and weekend parking.
Sorry, just for clarification, did you say this is the subject?
On page 18?
On page 18?
Yes.
Showing it on their little map, north of Broadway?
No, that's just where the little, because they're little ticks on the map, they don't actually show up exactly where it is, but if you look on page 19, and I have inspected this lot, this is absolutely M-Park lot 19, I don't think Mr. Navarro would disagree with me on this. The entrance says off the back laneway between Donald and Smith, and then the exit is onto Donald or Smith via the back laneway, which is, if you look at the aerial photo, exactly how it's described. The back laneway is between the smaller portion and the larger portion of the two stalls. And I have inspected this property, it didn't include photos, but it is in Park Lot 90.
And so it's 71 Donald.
That is the address that InPark gives it.
Okay.
We call it Donald Street, which makes it hard to sometimes reconcile properties, but I have gone to great lengths to reconcile InPark addresses with our roll numbers.
There are a number of properties on Donald Street that in your records don't have numbers,
Correct.
which can be
We just call them Donald Street. It is confusing. Sometimes we have civic addresses for things, sometimes we don't, sometimes we just have roll numbers. I always try to just add a street name when it's a roll number, so at least there's a description as to where it is. But what's been really helpful when I started researching parking in 2016, I had to reconcile all of our parking lots. It was helpful because normally when we have BA, it says in park lot such and such. But with addition to our BA saying in park lot such and such or Indigo, there were a number that I had a hard time reconciling if we didn't have BA on it. So what was very helpful is how in park says you get in and out of the lots. And then also me going out and counting stalls and taking pictures of what they are has really helped me reconcile exactly where all of these are and match them up with our roll numbers. So I know almost every roll number and who operates it if someone does.
Okay.
So then if you look on page 20 of my brief, these are a number of actual rates for south of Broadway. So these are all parking management companies that operate parking on the south side of Broadway. So we have Edmonton and Broadway, they charge $200 a stall. 240 Broadway, which is on the corner of Gary and Broadway, they charge $190 a stall. Donald and Assiniboine, they charge between $185 and $210. At 25 Fort Street, they charge $150. Just to give you an idea, because on my page 6, as I described, only 2 of them are on the south side of Broadway. One of them is significantly inferior. One of them is at 91 Edmonton, very similar location. The remainder of them are north of Broadway, so when we have comparables that aren't perfect, we do try to give supplementary information to give people the whole picture as to what's happening. That's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Navarro.
Your sales on page 6, you've indicated that the zoning on the majority of these is M zoning, correct?
Correct, that is the zoning of them.
Are you aware whether there are density and height requirements in the M zoning district?
There are different zoning requirements for downtown living classification versus the M zoning. And the subject property is downtown living, similar to comparable number 9.
Okay.
Because the ones that are comps 1 through 8 are on the north side of Broadway, so they do have that more vast zoning of the M zoning, and D is a little bit more limited.
Would you say that the density in the M zoning would be typically, they would allow for higher density, higher heights, depending on the location?
As I just
Yeah.
said, there's more limitations to the downtown living zoning than there is in M.
And
is
44 hard grade is significantly smaller than our subject.
Correct.
We've discussed that one prior also.
Yep.
Okay, those are my questions.
Mr. Whitbread.
I'm fine, thank you.
Ms. Linkletter.
No questions, thank you.
Me too. Thank you very much. That concludes the hearing.
No.
No! Darn!
I was like, no, we're not done yet.
I look at Lindsay and I go, oh, she'll finally get out of here with her illness. And then, oops.
No, I'll let Mr. Navarro have his
What's that
turn.
expression? Pumping the traces or something?
He deserves it.
Silly me.
He listened to me, I get to listen to
My
him.
apologies, Mr. Navarro. Could you carry on at length?
Okay, again, this is 0 Donald Street. You'll see a picture of it there on page 1, and then overhead on page 2. And this is in the downtown living. There are 86 stalls, 24,177 square feet. The last sale on record was $1 million, sold in 2004. That was a multi-roll sale again. On page 6, you'll see some of our sales comparables. Sorry, on page 5, you'll see some of our sales comparable. Again, the average $70.26, median $62.34. In terms of the comparable rents that we've used, we've gone with the income approach on this property. The median that we have is $185. The actual, I believe, is $160. We've gone with $185. We've applied it to 86. I did not count the stalls, so I don't know who's right here. We have a gross annual income of $190,920, 45% expense ratio. That gives us expenses of $85,914, and we have a net operating income of $105,006, to which we've applied a 5% capitalization rate. That gives us an income value of $2,100,120. The remainder of our brief is capitalization rate information that we've provided on the other briefs, and the income and expenses for this property, for which I've included the ID on that also. That is my presentation.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, you would agree that we dealt with the conjoining property last Wednesday, correct? Now, at that time, when I was looking at your brief and looking at your land sales, you did point out to us that you relied on 3 of them, and they were highlighted in your brief, and you pointed to Gary, Smith, and Hargrave. Would you be relying on those land sales as the most comparable to this one in this situation as well?
I didn't actually use the sales comparison approach on this property.
So when you look at them, what would you point to as the most comparable with the subject when you do look at your sales on page 5?
Maybe Smith Street.
So not comparable to Gary or Hargrave, considering their more recent sales than Smith Street?
No. Again, these are sales that we've looked at that have occurred in the marketplace in terms of their relevance for this property. I'm not sure how relevant they are. Again, there is a slight zoning variant, or the zoning difference here.
But they are the only sales that are sort of in the inner downtown, like you wouldn't think that Spence or Colony or Young or Spence or Austin would be comparable to the subject, considering its location?
Spence, like at the top.
All of them, there's a couple Spences on your list.
Well, if you notice the chart itself, there is some commentary on each one of the sales. So for each sale, we did some background information.
I was just asking
Yeah.
strictly with respect to location.
So the problem with a lot of the sales, and you've encountered this always, is trying to pick out the ones that have actually occurred that were purchased for their potential as a parking lot. And that is a hard thing to establish. So when we're looking at the sales that I've provided here, I've provided sales, however, there is an issue with a lot of them. So I don't know how much we can place on the sales also.
In your opinion, at 24,177 square feet and being a rectangular parcel that isn't irregular in shape, could this possibly be developed? Would it be a good site for potential development? I'm not saying that it's in the future or that's an idea. I'm saying just with respect to the size of the parcel and the shape of the parcel. Is that opportunity there?
I would say that, yes, so that is also indicated in my capitalization rate. So the 4.5 that we use for the other parts of the city, which I think is the capitalization rate that is more indicative of the better locations where higher densities and higher heights are allowable, that is appropriate for a 4.5. However, in areas where you don't have that, and there's a clear distinction and a clear difference here in terms of the zoning. I mean, this is in the downtown living. Heights and densities would be limited. So that is why we have a slightly higher capitalization rate. But yes, to answer your question, yes, you probably could develop this.
Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Whitbread,
Nothing, thanks.
Ms. Legislator?
No questions, thank you.
I got a real little small one. Your second last sale is where? It says it's next to King's Palace. Sorry, I don't know what
It
that
is on King and, what is the cross street?
Is it the like fenced in?
Yeah.
I think it's 250.
Yeah. There is an actual civic address on it. Yeah.
That's all my questions.
Sorry for answering the question for him, Mr. Navarro. My apologies. My apologies, Mr. Chairman.
Just don't let it happen again.
I aim to give information.
Now I can say that draws this to a close. Thank you very much.
Thank you.